Hello and welcome back. Things so far have been going really well in this game, and very soon I'll be jumping on my very first tactical destroyer, and afterwards I'll be jumping on the covert ops cruisers and of course bombers and other covert ops frigates, which I'm very curious to see how they will work in the live version of the game. But for now, I'll be sticking to the anomalies and I'll be sticking with the ordinary advanced missions, since I do prepare myself slowly for the storyline missions, which are indeed very difficult and they require a very well built ship. Okay, I have arrived at the location of my fleet, and we like to do these PvE fleets because they are fun and they are very effective at clearing these anomalies. Now you have to know, clearing the large, small and medium anomalies is increasing the chances of the spawning of the Inquisitor and Scout anomalies, since they are the most important anomalies in the game, since they can give you a lot of faction modules, a lot of blueprints, and they can give you a lot of other very important and very expensive stuff. Now, this is a null sec system, very far away from any high sec or low sec, and the current enemies here are tier 7, so that means I am mostly going to face cruisers, battle cruisers, and frigates and destroyers. The scout and inquisitor anomalies in these tier 7 tier 7 systems are indeed very difficult, and they can be sometimes very problematic, especially the bases, since they do spawn a lot of these faction rats that are very fast and that are very tanky, and they can do some serious damage to our ships. Now I am in a Talvar. Most of the time I do fly this ship since it is very fast and it is very easy to travel with this ship from one system to another. And besides that, this ship does have a very decent alpha damage, and of course it does have very decent range for a destroyer. Now speaking of the Talvar, I do want to get a Talvar sniper by the end of the week. I do want to get a Talvar sniper by the end of the week. That ship is very interesting because it has a separate mode that you can enable, which will give it a long range, and it will give other interesting buffs that I will have to test out. And I think that ship will help me a lot in the farming and in the overall missions in the game. Since, for example, like I did say before, the storyline missions can be very difficult, and they do have a lot of these faction enemies, which are very difficult to kill. And having a very long range is definitely going to help me in staying alive, and it is going to help me in clearing those missions, and of course in this case clearing these anomalies. Now I am very lucky that I do have very good teammates, since they are taking the aggro of these rats. Since if they were shooting me, for example, then this ship wouldn't actually live long in these anomalies, especially in the medium and large anomalies, since I don't have very high thermal resistance on this ship. I think it's only around 20%, and they do very high damage. They can actually one or two shot my shield, and not to mention my armor and hull, which is a lot less than my shield. So they are indeed capable at taking out my Talvar in less than couple seconds. So usually if I see one of them start to lock on me, I usually either warp out or I set my orbit at around 50 or 60 kilometers from them, and then I am safe from their fire. But unfortunately in that case I am also unable to return fire, so I have to wait until these rats are actually taken care of before I can reapproach the next wave and join the combat, which can be annoying, but that will be changed once I get my Talvar sniper or even the Talvar assault, or in other instances I might also roll in with a Caracal, or I also might roll in in another Guardian ship that I also do have. Now, speaking of other ships, besides the Talvar currently, since I do fly this ship a lot because it is very fun to fly this ship, and overall this ship is very efficient at most of the stuff in game, and I do have very good skills for this ship. Now, speaking of skills, I do have maxed out missile skills for this ship, and I do have nearly maxed out medium missile launcher skills, including the advanced, and also working on the expert skills. Those are for the Caracal, and they are going to improve my Caracal DPS by around 50 to 75% at this very moment. So I will have to take that ship and to see how that ship will perform after I increase those skills, since I will need those skills and I will need that ship in order to do these anomalies and to do these missions more easily. Of course, I can use my Talvar for these missions, but it is becoming a little bit risky. Now, it is risky for the Ammar and for the Minmatar missions, but Galante and Caldari missions and Anomalies are easier, and you can do them with this ship very efficiently and of course very fast. That is of course because of the resistances that this ship has. Now, you can make this ship to be tanky, you can use rigs that increase resistance, and of course you can use modules, the invulnerability field that increases the resistances on all damage types, which will improve the performance and which will improve the tanking performance of the ship a lot. And I might try that with a separate Talvar. But for my next ship, the Talvar Sniper, I am going to use that ship mostly for pure DPS and for pure damage, since it is after all a ship meant to be doing damage, and it is a ship that is capable at shooting targets from a long distance. And that is one of the things that made me think and that made me get that ship, since I do need a long range ship, and that ship currently is my goal and I am going to obtain it very soon. Now, the Talvar Assault is also looking very interesting. It is a assault destroyer, which is I think also part of the tactical destroyers, and in the future I'll be also getting that ship as well, since I do have to have all of my Talvars lined up, since I do like that ship a lot. And of course, after that, after I have a very decent and very stable income of ISK, and that means including the tier 8 missions, since they can pay very good, I will be saving up for the faction cruisers and faction frigates and of course the battleships, and it will be very interesting to see how they will perform. Now, I'll have to be very careful with those ships, since they will be very attractive targets, and I do not want to lose them that easily, so it will be kind of difficult to fly those ships, especially at this moment, since the game does have a lot of traffic and there is a lot of players in most of these systems. Even this Null system that we're at has some form of traffic, but of course we are trying to clear the system that we are staying in, and of course we are trying to clear all neighboring systems as well, which I think will lead to some very interesting situations. Well, let's jump on the next anomaly. Let's see what the next anomaly will be. Okay, well, I think I'll have to warp out now, because I warped in as the first ship. Now, there is a trick that you can use in order to prevent your ship from warping the first in any type of combat. You see, I use this micro warp drive, and the micro warp drive does have a couple penalties. One of the penalties is it does reduce your capacitor. The other penalty is it increases your signature radius, making your ship easier to hit and making your ship a bigger target that's easier to lock on. And the third thing is it increases the ship's inertia, pretty much making the ship harder to warp around and harder to move. And in this case, since I am a destroyer and most of my teammates are in cruisers, I am mostly going to be warping the first, since my ship is the fastest and it is also the lightest of all these ships. But when I turn on my micro warp drive, I do get the debuffs and I do get the penalties of the micro warp drive, which means that I do get increased signature radius and I do get the ship being less mobile. And when I have the micro warp drive on, then the cruisers will warp in first and afterwards I will warp in the last, which saves me from losing my ship and it saves me from taking aggression from these rats. That's one of the tricks that I use to stay alive in these fleets, since it does happen a lot that I warp in first in these anomalies and then I have to warp out or I have to warp or I have to orbit at a great distance from these rats in these anomalies. Which of course, if you have a afterburner, you don't have these penalties because the afterburner is only increasing your speed by a little bit, but on the other hand, you will not receive any penalties by using a afterburner, which of course you have by using the micro warp drive. But this is the Talvar, and the Talvar is using the micro warp drive as its primary source of moving fast through space. Potentially my favorite bonuses in the game. And of course, thankfully, you don't have to have these advanced skills for the ship. It makes the ship very inexpensive to operate and it makes the ship be very affordable and it makes the ship be very effective for its tier and for its price, which is important. Okay, let's see what will happen now. I have to say we were ratting for about 3 hours and I usually took the best moments of this fleet. Now we were ratting for around 3 hours and we did get a lot of ISK, and most of my ISK was of course spent on modules, on ships, on Plex, and I also did spend a lot on rigs. Since I am slowly gearing out most of my ships, I still need to get a very decent cruiser, and I did buy a classic Caracal. That ship is going to be very, very fun to fly, and there is a significant difference between the Caracal trainer and the classic Caracal. Now, of course, there are other Caracals. I think the Caracal Navi issue is going to be also very, very interesting. And I am also taking a interest in the Guardian ships. Since the last PvP video that I did have a Guardian ship as my kill. I'll be getting the Cormorant Guardian as well to test out its performance and to test out its special module, since I think the Guardian ships do have a special roll module that makes them a lot more tankier, and it will be very interesting to see how that ship will perform in these anomalies with that module on, since I think I can make those ships be very tanky, and I'm very curious to see how much I can push those ships, since I did already push this Talvar to its limits. Of course, most of the limits is from my personal skills, since I still have to increase the destroyer. Some of the destroyer skills are still not level 5, most of them are level 4, and I will need those as well. The destroyer engineering skills, yeah, that's how they're called, I almost forgot their name. I still need to have that on level 5, including the advanced and including the expert skills, since they are very important for the story operation and they're very important for the overall survivability of all of the destroyers. Now, I'm very curious to see how much I can make this ship better from this current standpoint, since after all, this ship is indeed very good, and I do use this ship at the moment as my primary ship for PvE and for other stuff, mostly for missions, since my main income is from missions. And in the future that might change. I might go for Anomalies, since I'll be switching to this null sack system in a very short time frame. I need to transport all of my ships from all of my stations that I have in high sec to this system, which will take some time since this system is very far away from my original home system, and it will take, I think, a day or two to collect all of my items that are scattered around the high sec, and it will take maybe around one more day to transport all of that to the new home system that I'll be staying in. Reaching this system was very tricky because I did take the wrong time to go here to reach this position, since I did encounter at least 10 gate camps throughout these 120 jumps that I had to do to go from my previous home system to this system, and it was a rough ride. But thankfully, at the moment, there is no bubbles, there is no interdictors, and that did save me a lot. But in the future, that might change, since the interdictors and the bubbles are going to be in the game in the near future. And of course, to prevent me from getting camped and to prevent me from losing any ship, I'll be also focusing on the covert ops cruisers and on the covert ops frigates, and most importantly on the bombers. And those ships are going to make traveling a lot easier because they have a cloaking device. And having a cloaking device is very convenient when you're traveling from high sec to null sec, and that will also require me to save a lot of ISK for these ships. Now I am mostly aiming for the covert ops cruisers, since I'll be using those cruisers for the Inquisitor sites, and I'll be using those cruisers for the Inquisitor and Scout anomalies, because they are offering fantastic performance and they can cloak, so I think they're going to work very well for that job. And of course I can avoid and of course I can also avoid all all contact with any pirates that might be lurking around the corner, since I can just cloak and wait for the fleet to warp out, or wait for the hunters to go and search in another system. So having a cloaking device is definitely a must for low sec and for null sec, and I am going to go and get a ship, and I'm going to go and get these modules for covert ops ships, since of course they are also one of my favorite classes in the game, and they're also one of my favorite ships in the game, because they're just so convenient to use and they have a very wide spectrum of roles, from being scouts to being ambushers. You can pretty much choose what you want to use these ships for. Well then, I think it is slowly time to wrap this up. This was a very, very efficient and a very successful fleet and a very successful anomaly run. And I am absolutely looking forward for more of these fleets, and this way we actually did make a lot of ISK during these anomalies, which will help us to, of course, to get better ships, and it will help us to obtain better modules, and it will help us to equip and to prepare our corporation for any future operation. Well, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed. Stay safe, take care, fly safe, and I'll see you next time.